on the topic, why aren't they listening? Well, I work a lot with lawyers and mediators who are challenged in dealing with the emotional content in a mediation setting. They're used to deal with the laws and the facts. And so they get frustrated when they can't get people off that. And so I actually gave a similar speech to the Florida Bar Association not too long ago at their encouragement, because they were just at a loss. How do we deal with people in conflict? And so then that evolved on to, are we talking or are we communicating? We as a profession. So often we're quick to dump on our expertise, our years of experience, our degrees. That comes from an experience-based mindset. Guess what? The world has changed. We need these connections. So we're going to explore that a little bit today. Just take a look at this. The dance of conflict. Why aren't they listening? So I want you to close your eyes right now, and I'm going to say a few phrases. And I want you to think or pay attention to what's going on in your brain as I say these words. Okay, ready? Okay. The eyes are like a roaring fire. Eyebrows arched like an arrow. The temples beating like a drum. Muscles flexing like a dance. The heart soars like a rocket. The brain plays a cacophony. Pay attention to what you're experiencing. So, your eyes. A few shout-outs. What did you experience? What did you notice? As I said some very charged words. Fear. Fear. Okay? Thank you. What else? Oh, come on. You had to have more experience than that. Come on. Anxiety. Confusion. Excitement. Yeah. So you can see a bunch of different emotions come up. Some may be positive. Some may be negative. So what's really happening? Someone asked me, getting ready to dive deeper? Learn more about what this is? Okay, I want you to sit at the edge of your chair. Sit at the edge of your chair, please. I want you to close your eyes again. And I want you to take 3 deep breaths in through the nose, really filling up the lungs, the abdomen, and exhaling slowly through the mouth. Do that 3 times. Okay, ready? Do you feel your mind a little clearer? A little slower? Heart's a little calmer? A little bit more relaxed? Because when we can put ourselves in that state of calmer presence and being, we are now ready to attend to what's going on around us. And when we shifted to the virtual medium with the pandemic, and I was talking to lawyers and mediators very quickly because they were going, "What's Zoom? How do we do this? How do you read body language and facial expressions on the camera? Same way you would in the room, And so I use this kind of slide because when people are in conflict or they fear what's going to happen, because we do have a natural fear of conflict because it's part of our drive to survive, and so it's natural. But the reality is that when we can navigate through conflict, some really wonderful outcomes can emerge. And so if we pay attention to just simple things like the facial expressions, look at that transition as you see the 5 different faces here. We want to move people through that experience. And if we're paying attention, we can see what's going on for them, particularly in the eyes, just like that second slide I showed to you. So much shows up in the eyes because of what's going on in the brain. So we know neuroscientifically, feelings precede cognitions. And I emphasize that because when I was going through my master's degree program back in the early 80s, cognitive behavioral therapy was the way to go. And it's still very strong. But we know it's even more powerful when we go to motion-focused interventions. Deal with the emotions first before we get into the change behavior. The relapse rate of just CBT is very high. We have much more longer lasting influence and retention when we shift to focusing on the emotions first. And that's one of the things in mediation, dealing with conflict. Too often lawyers, the traditional lawyer who becomes a mediator, focuses on the facts of the law. And then they realize why they're having such trouble getting to resolution. Well, guess what? They never dealt with the emotions. And so that's a lot of what I do today is working with lawyers and mediators, especially throughout the world, to help them with basic techniques. Because largely they're afraid of conflict. They're afraid of emotions. They've never been taught how to deal with emotions. Would you agree that happens in medical school, doctor? Yeah, they don't teach how to deal with emotions in medical school either. So we're seeing a big shift these days, not only in law schools, medicine, but also business schools. Our leaders need to learn. There's a new way of doing business with our employees. And if we know what to look for, we can use these facial expressions. We can use emotions strategically and artfully in ways that are ethical and support the person moving forward. I actually changed this word just yesterday because of anxiousness. Anxiousness is a state of being we all experience. Anxiety is a bigger condition. Now, we know that anxiety and depression are at all-time highs right now, and for a lot of reasons that I won't go into. But I think we can all identify with feeling anxious, right? Like I get anxious coming to a presentation like this, just because I've done it tons of times, but still, new group, new audience, however you receive what I say. But I practice a little deep breathing, and that helps me get through. And so what we're going to do is a chance for you to experience, whoops, too fast, how we show up, how we connect, and how we respond. And in this case, it's going to be with yourself. So I'm going to take you back to closing your eyes again, because when we keep our eyes open during exercises, we're focused out there. When we close our eyes, it gives us a chance to focus in here. Okay? So close your eyes, and I'm going to walk you through an exercise here so you can experience again where your brain goes. So with the first step, your eyes closed, again, take a couple deep breaths. That centers you. I want you to imagine a really wonderful experience. You know, see the sights, the smells, the people, the clothes you're wearing, wherever you are. Bring it back to full living color. That wonderful, wonderful experience. Now, with that experience present in you, I want you to pay attention to your breathing, to how your heart feels, your chest, maybe your facial muscles. Remember that. Now, I want you to think of something really negative. You know, maybe something bad that's happened to you in your life. Okay, I don't think we need it now. No. Thank you, though. Somebody. Okay. Sorry we interrupted your negative experience. You probably are welcoming that, though, right? Okay, but let's go back there, because I want you to pay attention to the difference. Bring back the negative experience, something that hasn't gone so well. I can think of, there was a span of 5 years, actually, where I lost so many family members. It was like, what's going to happen next? I was living in a state of fear and anxiety. I was anxious. Okay, I'm not going to keep you there, but I want you to pay attention to any shift you experience between that positive and that negative. Now let's run back to that positive experience again. Bring it back full and living color. What's that feel like again, to be back in that wonderful space where you felt so good and felt good about the people that you were with? And again, notice the difference you have in your physiology. Take a couple of deep breaths. And I want you to come back to me. And I'd like a couple of people to share. What did you notice in that shift? In that wonderful positive experience, that not so good experience, back to the positive. What did you notice in your breathing, your heart rate?
Breathing is more calm once you come to that place of Zen.
Yeah, your breathing is more calm once you come to that place of Zen. Yeah. Yeah. Anybody else? What did you notice?
Less tense.
Pardon?
You're less tense.
Less tense? Okay. Yes.
I think during the negative one, my heart was going a little bit faster and had a slight pain in the head.
Okay. Heart faster, pain in the head. Yep. Common emotions. Yes.
Phil, when you go from the looking at the light type of experience and then go into the heavy, you feel heavy. And you feel that shift within you. And then when you go back to the light, you feel lifted.
Yes. Thank you for sharing that, because that is very true. A lot of people report feeling this, just the weight is on my shoulders, you know. And for some, it's harder to come out of that negative, going to the positive, or they might not be at the positive at the same level they were before. And then others can't wait to get out of that negative and run to the positive. Okay? And so we're different in that way. But that brief experience is an excellent example of how our bodies shift in very small ways. And so again, if we pay attention, if we know what to look for in ourselves and in others, we can use that information strategically. And again, going back to the change of the look of the face and the eyes. So it's not uncommon in mediation, I might say, you know, I just noticed a shift in your facial expression. What's going on? Or your eyes sort of seem to cloud up. Am I missing something? Did something happen? And so I'm asking open-ended questions to help them talk about what their experience is. And when you do that, do they feel that you care? Do they feel that you're paying attention and you're in tune with where they are in whatever that moment? So how does listening get derailed? Well, a few things. Our brain's reacting. It's a drive to survive, a fight, flight, flee. And now we have the fawn. Capitulating, trying to make things good right away to minimize the conflict. So it's natural. And then emotions serve us. And it could be, well, it's oftentimes triggered from past events, but are showing up in the present. Oftentimes how we show up in the present has little to do with what's going on in the present. It's tied back there. That's why we have to take a look at the emotions. But it could be that gut reaction. And for many of us, we talk about that gut reaction. But it could also be some kind of distraction. You know, my fear's coming up, and now it's like I'm not paying attention to you, and I'm hearing your sound, but I'm not listening to your words. And then we have all this stuff going on in the brain, the cacophony I talked about before, increased neuronal firing, increased chemical distortions. All of that's going on. That's disrupting our neural signals to get from our initial autonomic response up to our prefrontal cortex, where we make sense of things. And I'll show you a model of that shortly. Some common emotions. When anger comes up, it can actually lead to impatience and rash decision making. It's sadness and fear. That's another one of our key four emotions. That's where we get clouded by uncertainty and stay stuck in being able to make a decision. Or excitement. We can act too rashly, too spontaneously. All of those can be great, but all of those can be very detrimental. And so it's about how do we manage that? But this is what's going on in people's brains. And so a little bit about the brain. Well, you know, I talked about going to TEDx. I do have a podcast called Decoding the Conflict Mindset. And I was just speaking with somebody the other day who said, you know, if you really want your podcast to soar, start inviting really famous people. So I made a decision yesterday. I'm going to reach out to Daniel Goleman, who is the father of emotional intelligence, and see if he'll join me on this journey. Because I follow his work. He was the core of my dissertation, the psychology of good bosses versus bad bosses. We'll see what happens. I'll let you know. But just a few months ago, I mean, the amygdala hijack has been out since he wrote his book on emotional intelligence. What was that? Early 1990s, I think it was. Even on LinkedIn, he publicly said, you know what? I think I got it wrong. It's not the amygdala hijack. The amygdala is just one portion of the limbic brain that gets involved in this emotional reaction. So he's reframed it. It's now the emotional hijack. And that makes much more sense. But I'll talk about that a little bit further. So what happens, without going deep into the brain science here, we first have, well, what we see and what we hear actually triggered the autonomic brain at the back of our head, sending signals into our body and back up through the brain. Well, the first piece it hits, that is the amygdala. And guess what the amygdala does? Generates adrenaline. Get us to do something, good or bad. And so that gets activated right away. And have you ever felt when you're triggered and you get that little high state for a little bit? But then it does get into the limbic brain, and that's where cortisol, our stress hormone, is generated. And this is where we go back into early childhood, looking at the emotional focus kinds of stuff, because if we've had a traumatic upbringing, we tend to naturally emit more cortisol on a daily basis than others who've not had that traumatic upbringing. And in fact, talk about male-female differences, is that it's been found that the corpus callosum between the right and left hemispheres in women tend to be a little bit thicker. And so that could be why they may not be able to transition back and forth quite so much in managing emotions. There's a lot of research still going on that. We'll see where it goes. But it can take 3 to 4 hours for that cortisol to clear. And we actually have a psychological term for it called flooding, where we get so much cortisol in our brain that the neuronal signals cannot get through the limbic brain to get up here. And that's where we can feel emotionally stuck, feel clouded in our thinking, and unable to move. And so it literally is like roadblocks to our executive brain, our human intelligent brain. And so what happens when people are triggered? Well, 4 key things. They become disoriented because it's like the signals are not making it through. Their decision making just goes down, because this is where we do our good, rational, logical thinking, but we're still stuck back here in the limbic brain. The ability to see different perspectives diminishes. My way or the highway kind of attitude. Our attention span narrows. We see only what's in front of us rather than stepping back and, whoa, what's the bigger picture here? And we tend to be reactive in the moment. And so if we go to the principles of emotional intelligence, and we heard this spoken yesterday several times, about the importance of pausing, creating that moment in the moment so we can actually take that deep breath, slow down our heartbeat, slow down the neuronal firing, and therefore slow down the chemical release that's happening for us. So it's in that moment that we want to capture, but that does take being aware of ourselves and how we manage ourselves. Do we tend to be that highly reactive person? Or are we so slow that we never get things resolved? And then paying attention to others. A guest of mine, Henry Polsky from the East Coast, Philadelphia, I think, said in my podcast recently, mindfulness is not just about getting better at sensing ourselves. Mindfulness is also about getting better at sensing where other people are coming from. And that's actually the third quadrant of emotional intelligence, other awareness. And then how do we use all this information to manage that relationship? And that goes back to what you were saying, Kati, as far as, men and women do speak differently. So how do we show up in ways that the other person can actually engage with us? Us knowing where they're coming from, but we also know where we're coming from, and adjusting that so we can have a conversation, not a confrontation. And lastly, believe it or not, I was amazed when I saw the science on this, because I've dealt with a lot of high conflict people, and that's a whole other world beyond usual behavior that I'm not even going to get into. But when we get triggered, that drive to survive, we just boom. And some people go faster, some people go slower to get to that high point. That's another dimension to understanding people. But it can then take up to as much as 72 hours for that physiological sensation of that triggering moment to go away. Just stop and think about it. Last time you had a fight with somebody significant in your life. And the first day you're just stomping around and, so ticked off. And then a few hours later, you're feeling a little bit calmer about it, but you're still annoyed about it. And then the next day, it's like, okay, getting better here, but then 48 hours, it's like, okay, let's get some perspective here. And then 72 hours, yeah, we had that fight. What was that about again? And I have a lot of people come to me and say, we had a horrible fight about 3 or 4 days ago. The darndest thing is we can't even remember what the fight was about. And why is that? Well, again, our brain is doing all kinds of things, interfering with neuronal pulses to get into our short-term and long-term memory. You ever heard people talk about selective recall? Well, again, our brain's fired up. You're going to remember something different than I will in a conflict. It's just the way the brain works. And so what we know, and I get excited about this because so many major universities today are studying the neuroscience of emotional intelligence and furthering the work of Daniel Goleman. Stanford's really top of the list, Harvard is. And so the work from James Doty, I used this in a medical conference on a presentation last fall, is that, again, Stanford, way up there in terms of reputation, but they are closely working with one of the top right hands of the Dalai Lama to take a look at the science of compassion and the physiology that goes with it. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. But that we have a chronic release of these brain hormones, these chemicals going on. And we have our drive to survive is no different than it was with our prehistoric predecessors. But what triggers us in today's world is nowhere near what they used to in terms of survival for the life. But our bodies don't know that. And so we are triggered in many kinds of ways. I know for myself, I can only spend so many days with a city like New York. There's just too many sounds and movement and noise that so I haven't been out a lot. Because I know that about myself. It's true for San Francisco, it's true for Los Angeles. When any big city just gets too much. And so it's important that we understand that we have these triggers all the time. And preparing people to engage, preparing people to have a conversation, and redirecting the confrontation become critical in making sure that we move forward. And so I want you to take a look at this list here and identify which ones might come up for you when you're triggered. These are 10 known common fear-based triggers that come up and why we stop listening. And again, many times this goes back to some childhood experience. It could be, I know when I was growing up, my dad was a very charismatic businessman, and yet he also had a very overt bias to anybody who looked different than he did. And so he would get critical. And so whenever I hear someone being criticized, I just sort of, tackle up a little bit. So I'm really attuned to that, and that's why I work hard when I do to redirect them. And our job then is to really take a look at asking open-ended questions, reframing the negative to a positive, redirecting confrontation to learning conversations. I'll give you an example. Just the other day, I work a lot with employees who have medical conditions in the workplace. And somebody had a pre-existing condition that, due to circumstances in his school setting and classroom, just got to the point in March that he just couldn't take it. He could not continue with this classroom. Had experience, but circumstances were beyond his control. And so we did put him into a special assignment for the rest of the year. We literally just met a few days ago. And he started talking about, I feel like I failed my students. I failed the parents. I'm feeling anxiety already about going back in to meet with the parents with the IEPs that I'm being asked to develop. And I sort of looked at him and said, failed. I just been hearing how experience and your special credentialing you have and what expertise you bring to the field. And so they need these IEPs done before the end of the year, and you're exactly the person to do it. So, again, failing? No. You're being tapped into to use your superpower, to use your expertise in ways that need to get something done for the benefit of the students. You're not failing them, you're helping them move along. So that's a reframe. He's called it failure. I'm like, no, there's an opportunity to succeed. And so the influencer's mindset, that's you, that's me. I used to call this a leader, but it's like, yeah, we can be influential at any level. So out of adversity comes opportunity. Out of moments of pain comes a momentum of gain. And we heard this talked about yesterday, right? Is sometimes we have to sort of hit rock bottom before we're motivated to move. But I'll take it back even longer than that. In the middle of difficulty lies opportunity. And so that's where you and I come in to work with people who may be in pain. to work with people who may have difficulty so that we can help them move forward. I like to say we need to understand the past just long enough to recognize the impact of the present so we can move forward differently. It's that shift in mindset. The shift in mindset. I want to take you to the 3 Bs. Just a little technique I came up with because, again, when we're in that moment, we're so likely to take action and get triggered by something. But if you feel your body reacting and get to know where your body tends to react, is it the stomach? Is it the rapid heartbeat? Is it the shallow breathing? Is it the brain freeze? Those are your first signals because whatever you see and hear is going from the autonomic brain into the body and then back up through the brain. That's your first signal, what to look for. So be in the moment. Oh, something's going on here. And then what I want you to do is simply to take 3 deep breaths. Again, calm that heart down. Relax the breathing. Slow down the brainwave activity. Get yourself ready to then break free from the moment. Visualize how you want to show up. Yes, you've just been triggered. But I'm in control of myself in this moment. And now how do I want to show up on the other side? Why is that so important? Because the visualization takes us out of the limbic brain and puts us back up into the prefrontal cortex. It takes just moments. I have a little video on YouTube if you want to look it up. It's called the 3 Bs. And so as influencers, we are responsible for creating that safe harbor. I don't know if anybody knows what this picture is. Avalon Bay, Catalina Island. Just 26 miles across the sea from Los Angeles. Love to go there. It's sort of my safe haven. But like a harbor, where boats go into to get out of the high seas and the rough winds for safety and protection, that's our job. To create that safe harbor for people to engage, for people to move on with their life. And this quote with Brene Brown, I guess it doesn't come up. I define a leader as anyone who takes responsibility for finding the potential in people and processes, and who has the courage to develop that potential. It takes courage, folks. But this is where confidence comes into play, like Kati was just talking about. When we feel confident, hey, I have the skills and abilities. I'm not afraid of conflict. In fact, what can I learn from conflict? What can I learn from how other people see things? That's where we have the conversations, not the confrontations. We also need to model the way. Even the tone of your voice can have a powerful impact to somebody who's emotionally intense. And so I do get feedback quite a bit that, your voice is just so calming. Well, was I always that way? No. I learned what affected people and what helped people get through things. And then also, we want to create that positive, encouraging atmosphere by asking open-ended questions. Well, how do you see this? How are you impacted by this right now? What's going on for you? What brings you here now? What is driving this to be so difficult for you right now? What else is going on? And as I ask this question, I'm always amazed at how people don't see the connections, the dots between what's happening in their life. And then it's like, oh, I'm not crazy. I'm not losing my marbles. There's been a lot going on. Okay, let's chunk it down and let's start working on stuff. And so this is back to the Dalai Lama, and I started working on the area of compassion a few years ago. After I just went back and got my doctorate degree in 2011 to 2014. Something I'd put off for a few years, obviously. But in the course of doing that, we really got into the neuroscience, particularly behind emotions. Compassion became one of my areas that I really studied a lot. And it goes beyond empathy. Empathy is part of compassion, but compassion is that bigger picture. And so it's that expression, but it's also accompanied by an action. That's what makes the difference. And so, so he talks about doing things with influence, persuasion, compassion, dignity. And again, it goes back to the neuroscience. It's a complex interplay between the dance of hormones in our brain, the neuronal firing. If we use our EQ, it will help take us back to the prefrontal cortex, where we make sense of things, where we can see things differently. And then, 3 meaning about yesterday, right? Is sometimes we have to sort of hit rock bottom before we're motivated to move. But I'll take it back even longer than that. In the middle of difficulty lies opportunity. And so that's where you and I come in to work with people who may be in pain, to work with people who may have difficulty, so that we can help them move forward. I like to say we need to understand the past just long enough to recognize the impact of the present, so we can move forward differently. It's that shift in mindset. A shift in mindset. I want to take you through the 3 Bs. It's a little technique I came up with because, again, when we're in that moment, we're so likely to take action and get triggered by something. But if you feel your body reacting and get to know where your body tends to react, is it the stomach? Is it the rapid heartbeat? Is it the shallow breathing? Is it the brain freeze? Those are your first signals, because whatever you see and hear is going from the autonomic brain into the body and then back up through the brain. That's your first signal, what to look for. So be in the moment. Oh, something's going on here. And then what I want you to do is simply to take 3 deep breaths. Again, calm that heart down. Relax the breathing. Slow down the brainwave activity. Get yourself ready to then break free from the moment. Visualize how you want to show up. Yes, you've just been triggered. But I'm in control of myself in this moment. And now how do I want to show up on the other side? Why is that so important? Because the visualization takes us out of the limbic brain and puts us back up into the prefrontal cortex. It takes just moments. I have a little video on YouTube if you want to look it up. It's called the 3 Bs. And so as influencers, we are responsible for creating that safe harbor. I don't know if anybody knows what this picture is. Avalon Bay, Catalina Island. Just 26 miles across the sea from Los Angeles. Love to go there. It's sort of my safe haven. But like a harbor, where boats go into to get out of the high seas and the rough winds for safety and protection, that's our job. To create that safe harbor for people to engage, for people to move on with their life. And this quote with Brene Brown, I guess it doesn't come up. I define a leader as anyone who takes responsibility for finding the potential in people and processes, and who has the courage to develop that potential. It takes courage, folks. But this is where confidence comes into play, like Kati was just talking about. When we feel confident, hey, I have the skills and abilities. I'm not afraid of conflict. In fact, what can I learn from conflict? What can I learn from how other people see things? That's where we have the conversations, not the confrontations. We also need to model the way. Even the tone of your voice can have a powerful impact to somebody who's emotionally intense. And so I do get feedback quite a bit that, your voice is just so calming. Well, was I always that way? No. I learned what affected people and what helped people get through things. And then also, we want to create that positive, encouraging atmosphere by asking open-ended questions. Well, how do you see this? How are you impacted by this right now? What's going on for you? What brings you here now? What is driving this to be so difficult for you right now? What else is going on? And as I ask this question, I'm always amazed at how people don't see the connections, the dots between what's happening in their life. And then it's like, oh, I'm not crazy. I'm not losing my marbles. There's been a lot going on. Okay, let's chunk it down and let's start working on stuff. And so this is back to the Dalai Lama, and I started working on the area of compassion a few years ago. After I just went back and got my doctorate degree in 2011 to 2014. Something I'd put off for a few years, obviously. But in the course of doing that, we really got into the neuroscience, particularly behind emotions. Compassion became one of my areas that I really studied a lot. And it goes beyond empathy. Empathy is part of compassion, but compassion is that bigger picture. And so it's that expression, but it's also accompanied by an action. That's what makes the difference. And so, so he talks about doing things with influence, persuasion, compassion, dignity. And again, it goes back to the neuroscience. It's a complex interplay between the dance of hormones in our brain, the neuronal firing. If we use our EQ, it will help take us back to the prefrontal cortex, where we make sense of things, where we can see things differently. And then 3 main brain chemicals. Oxytocin. I feel good. And so again, doing things in ways that make you feel good. And then dopamine, the reward center. Oh, thank you for that gift. Or let me give you a gift. The law of reciprocity. If I give, it makes you feel better, it makes me feel better. If I receive, it makes me feel better, it makes you feel better. And then serotonin. And that's about how we can reduce anxiety. Okay, just do that deep breathing. Get to that calmer place. And all of that's going on up here. Has nothing to do with your logical brain, how intelligent you are, how smart you are, how experienced you are. This is just how we function. So we're moving from an experience base to a connection base, going beyond what we know, but how people interact. And so I love Stephen Covey's quote. He wrote 7 Habits of Highly Effective People back in the late 1980s. That's had a resurgence because of what we know in the neuroscience now to support those 7 habits. But he also passed away, if you didn't know. And he was working on an 8th habit with his son, Stephen Covey Jr., on trust. But see, first understand, and that's a lot of what I've been talking about today, where are the people coming from? When we feel that they're not listening, are we just talking to them, or are we really communicating? And are we asking questions to have conversations, not confrontations? And I really like what this one, and again, this has been around for a long time, Theodore Roosevelt. No one cares how much you know until they know how much you care. Okay? And that's why we've seen this shift between, I have a doctorate degree and I have this many years of experience and I've on all these boards and panels and blah, 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 blah. Okay? Know your stuff. Do I trust you? Not yet. Until I do some of the other things we talked about. So I want to share with you this opportunity. I do have an ebook that's on Amazon. You take a look at this QR code. I do encourage you to buy it because guess what? All the proceeds goes back to, we talked about getting education into the schools earlier. I'm part of an organization in Southern California called Kids Managing Conflict. And so we actually take programs into the schools, teaching students how to be peer mediators for their schools. And it's really been excitingly wonderful. And so encourage you to buy it. And so it talks a lot about what I've already said here and pass it on. So I want to share with you a couple techniques. The impact of AAC and peak. First of all, acknowledgement. It's not appreciation, it's acknowledgement. Acknowledging where other people are coming from goes a huge way in making connection. And then demonstrating that awareness shows that you're paying attention to where they're coming from. And that you have some concern, you have some interest about what's happening for them. And then making that connection. Starting to talk about something, where's this coming from, etc. AAC. And this is how you do it. The PEAK comes in as an acronym. Acknowledge people for their presence. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for a great job on that project. You really contributed a lot. And you know what? I enjoy working with you because you're always so positive. You could add many more P's to that P, okay? But just to get you started. E, I appreciate your effort. We still got work to do. Again, people feel here that you actually see it. And again, you just have a lot of energy. That gets me up. We can feel the heat from one another. And also then enthusiasm and get a positive outlook, a positive attitude. A, I just want to comment, I just like your positive attitude on things. Things get down, you just get back up. And that's really important. Or what an achievement. Wow. Great. And then, or what an accomplishment. And then lastly, I can see this is really challenging for you right now. Again, people hear that you actually acknowledge that. Or again, going back to contributions. Or, that was really a genuine show of compassion there towards your coworker. We need more of that. So again, easy acronyms to sort of shape your thinking around. Keep in mind some of these common tools. And I'll end with this. Watch your thoughts, they become words. Watch your words, they become actions. Watch your actions, they become habits. Watch your habits, they become your character. What your character becomes your destiny. And so by paying attention to how we show up, we can make changes that now influence others. I'll leave you with a resource that's not in the presentation, but I draw a lot on his work, Dr. Robert Cialdini, and he's from the University of Arizona in Tempe. And for years, he has studied communications. And so he has uncovered, through research and field studies, 7 factors for persuasion and influence. And we talked about some of these. Kati talked about some of them too. I don't know, even though she knows that. But the law of reciprocity, social proof. She promotes her colleague in the workplace. The colleague promotes her. Always better to have somebody else talk about you. The 7th one that he just added recently was unity, and we see that. I was watching the news about the food banks giving out food on Easter Sunday, or the people that came together that saved the children being thrown out the window from that fire. That's people coming together with unity, coming together. Not all this, all the negativity that we hear. But lots of good stuff around that too, and that's a whole other topic. But Dr. Robert Cialdini, Cialdini. And so with that, remember what I asked you to do at the very beginning? Well, I hope that, I think what I did is I had you on the edge of your seat. I took your breath away. And I hope I've inspired you. Yes. Thank you very much. Questions? This is how you can connect with me. Questions, comments? I see, I took your breath away. Yes.
Can you expand more on what you do with the kids? I work with kids as well, and I love them.
Okay. Yeah, and so not my program. I'm just very fortunate to be, able to get into it. But with some design curriculum and strategic intervention, then they do. They actually have scholarships where schools can apply for funds, but also to buy into the program as far as, and then we have a team that come in to provide the training and work with them as mentors to the peers, and so support them through the development and then ongoing implementation of the program. There's another program that's very affiliated with the Western Justice Center out of Santa Monica, Pasadena actually, and they've done a lot of successful interventions with some LA-based schools. And so we work a lot in cooperation and connection. So I'm working right now trying to bring KMC down to San Diego because it's been very LA-based. Yeah, but it is available in a broader spectrum. Yeah, so thank you for asking. Yes,
I have
Tom.
a comment. Thank you very much for everything you've shared. What you talked about, shared with me how refined you are, and understanding the communication of information, sharing knowledge, and handling the situation of life, what to do with it, and how to get along better with everybody. It's something that I look at the irony of life, how a lot of the common folks can't get to that information. They don't know the details of it, but they deal with the same situation. A lot of times what they do is go out nowadays, the intensity, as we all know from the news and stuff, getting drunk, doing drugs, doing something to handle it. They don't know what else to do with it. Now, what if I had a suggestion to share with you about how you'd be able to maybe help out more of the public? I don't know what to say on that. The common people not knowing how to, just don't know about it.
Yeah.
One little example I want to give, I talked to you all out yesterday, what I've been through, but one thing I didn't mention was I had my license taken away for 10 years. I had to ride the city bus. There's this tall white guy getting on the bus. I was the only Caucasian on there. No big deal. Well, I had to walk to the back of the bus with my long legs. I couldn't fit in those seats. But back there, that's where all the guys sat. All back there looked at me like, what are you doing? Well, I used to play a lot of basketball with them, didn't bother me a bit. But point being, they're turning around to be like, hello, what's happening? I mean, just short, quick sentences. And hearing you detailing things so well about how we all interact, parts of the brain and stuff, it's even getting excited about it, but it's something that I just got to share with you. Please continue sharing it to others and trying to get more to the common folks.
Well, thank you for that suggestion. And, this has become my passion. Like I said, Deborah is my name, conflict's my game. I go looking for trouble. And so finding the right forms to do that. I will share with you that there is I'm not going to remember the exact name of it, but there is a National Association of Community-Based Mediation. And I did interview the director of that in my podcast a while back. And so what's happening is that there are programs, cropping up in communities where there tends to be more conflictual behavior. And it's got some wonderful stories about how, being able to resolve some basic differences, people on the streets and things like that. And it's pretty amazing. And I've also heard, through the pandemic that some mediators, I think it was in Detroit, would actually get a van and be like, 911 conflict.